Ladies and gentlemen, Claire Fellman.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a landscape architect at Snøhetta. We're a multidisciplinary design firm based in Oslo and New York. And I just wanted to thank the Municipal Art Society for inviting us this morning to present the Times Square project. We're really excited to be here. So Snøhetta actually came to New York around 10 years ago from Oslo to work on the World Trade Center memorial project, and has since continued to work on complex urban sites here in New York. In 2009, as many of you know, the New York City Department of Transportation conducted a pilot project to close Broadway for 5 city blocks right in Times Square. What you're looking at here is actually one of the first days of that closure, where the Broadway roadway was opened up to pedestrian occupation. So beach chairs were spread out, and people really took back over that public right-of-way as a public space. A year later, after the traffic study was completed and it proved to have been a successful pilot, Snøhetta was contracted by the Department of Transportation and the Department of Design and Construction to work on a design for the permanent transformation of Times Square into a public space with large plazas. As you can see here, the full scope of the project is from 42nd Street up to 47th Street. The intersection that forms the bow tie shape of Times Square is actually the intersection of 7th Avenue and Broadway. And so in red there, you can see the former curb lines for Broadway, which are now in black shown for the new curb alignments. Will actually eliminate that kind of trajectory of Broadway through the space and unify this whole floor of this big outdoor room. So there were a number of conditions that, really extreme urban conditions in Times Square that we were striving to mediate between in our designs for Times Square. So I'm just going to run through some of those conditions. So we had the desire to celebrate Broadway as a roadway. Even though its curbs were being removed, we wanted to celebrate the history of that unique kind of road as it cuts diagonally across the city, while also connecting it into the larger fabric of the theater district. We also were working with this very thin surface, the ground plane of Times Square, which, you know, from above, looking up, you're seeing this kind of hyperactivity of the vertical walls of Times Square, which, in terms of technology, have far outpaced the level of technology that's gone into this kind of ground plane that people are actually inhabiting. So there's the sort of constant distraction of the vertical, and then the intensity of infrastructure that's actually just below the surface, in some cases only 4 inches beneath the surface of the roadway. You're actually into the MTA. Very old structures, many of them from 1904, around the time when the Times building was built. In addition to all of the MTA structures, right under the site, there's a whole web of public and private utilities which are aging, and many of them are being replaced as part of this reconstruction. If you haven't been by Times Square lately, actually, you can see many of the, it's in construction right now, so a lot of the roadway is actually torn up, and you can see some of that web of infrastructure. There's also, of course, the challenge of the tourists. and the locals and how they move between and past each other in Times Square. And speaking of layers, this kind of layers of history in this part of the city, one of our goals in the design was really to have a dialogue with these really incredible historic artifacts that frame the space and are part of the collective memory, as well as accommodating extreme flexibility required for the temporary events that are happening in the new pedestrian spaces. So the new plazas need to accommodate this kind of maximum energy state of New Year's Eve, as well as forming a successful space during the calmer times of day and times of year, which do exist, actually. The more time you spend there, there's all sorts of really amazing times of day in Times Square. And then, of course, the part of the whole reason for the project in terms of the DOT's initiation of the pilot project was to solve some very serious traffic and pedestrian issues. So, pedestrians were often flowing out off the sidewalks into the roadway, creating dangerous conditions because of conditions like pedlock, where there's just too many people for the size of the actual sidewalks. And what you're looking at here is actually the intersection between Broadway and 7th Avenue, which by eliminating that intersection actually sped up traffic on 7th Avenue. So one of the things we started looking at were all of the different programmatic magnets within the space. So why are people going to Times Square? They're going there to work. They're going there for shopping, for theater, for food. And we looked at how people move across this space and really determined that it's a rapidly changing landscape of programs, at least at street level. And so we also looked at actual counts of pedestrian traffic throughout the day. And you can see here kind of the morning condition, afternoon and evening. And of course, those counts, we're looking at the existing conditions in Times Square, but we really needed to project forward how might people move given the new event programming within the Broadway plazas. So with furnishings and events taking place in that new open space, which amounts to about 3 acres of new open space in the city, how might they move? And we looked at precedents like in Grand Central, the way people move around obstacles is actually counterintuitively. Instead of slowing people down, sometimes it helps create a sense of orientation and organizes flow within a space. We also worked with the patterning of the paving to break down the scale of these plazas. What we have here is 2 different axes of Broadway that we were working with in the paving there. And then we also created a suite of a family of different bench furnishing types with a really kind of diverse set of ways that they could be used. As you can see, it's quite a necessary thing right now in Times Square. I mean, people will gravitate to even the subtlest edge that they might find, a change in grade where they might be able to sit down and form a social space. So there's a family eating right on the curb of 7th Avenue. The naked cowboy, he likes to stand up on a curb. It becomes a stage for street performers. And elements like news boxes become, again, like a stage for tourists and anyone really going into Times Square. They love to take pictures. So the furnishings were designed in order to accommodate many different types of uses, and in addition to accommodate events such as this. So within the benches, there's actually a event infrastructure folded into the benches with power and broadcast plug-in points to accommodate. There's over 365 events in Times Square every year, from rodeos to rock shows. So streamlining those events, getting rid of generators, all of that is a big part of the goals of our project. Here we're looking at a rendered view of what is actually under construction right now. So next week they're going to be starting to lay the pavers, and here a view from the TKTS steps. And that is it. Thanks, everyone.